Welcome to Changing the Game, where bold leaders, rule breakers, and trailblazers drop the playbook and share how they lead, win, and shake things up. Hey there, it's Jordan, your host. If you've been loving the conversations on Changing the Game, I'm excited to introduce something new, the Nobody Cares Club, a show about building the life you actually want without worrying so much about what everyone else thinks. We're talking confidence, wellness, identity, relationships, and the reminder that nobody is thinking about you as much as you think they are. And that's the best news you'll ever hear. So stop waiting, stop overthinking, and get ready to be inspired to go after your dreams. Search Nobody Cares Club wherever you listen, launching summer 2026. Today, I'm joined by Carly Kastens. Carly is a former Division I volleyball player from Dartmouth College who has built her career at the center of one of the biggest shifts we've seen in college athletics. She's currently a director of college client engagement at Altius Sports Partners, where she works directly with universities and athletes on everything related to NIL and beyond. From helping athletes navigate opportunities to supporting athletic departments with strategy, operations, and revenue generation, Carly has had a front row seat to how this space is evolving in real time. What stood out to me most about Carly during our first conversation is how much she genuinely cares about the athlete experience beyond the game. She's focused on helping athletes understand who they are, what they're interested in, and how to start building something for themselves while they're still in it. Carly, I'm so excited to chat with you. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. I'm glad we got connected, glad to join the show, and very excited to chat today.
Yes, me too. I'm so excited. Marina Paul, for everyone listening, is the one who connected us. She is going to be on, or maybe you at this point, you probably have already listened to Marina's episode.
Yeah, she's a great one, and always doing the connecting, so I appreciate it.
I love that. And the athlete world is truly so small. So I love when I get connected to other awesome people through the show.
Yeah, same here.
So I want to kick it off, Carly. Your background, you played volleyball at Dartmouth. That is wild. Playing at the Ivy League level is something that I don't know how you probably balance the academic rigor with the athletic demands. So I would just love to know, did you always want to play in the Ivy League, or was that always your goal?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say the short answer is no, it was not always the goal. Playing sports in college was always the goal. I started in elementary school playing basketball. My dad had played, and that was the sport. I was going to do that, and then found volleyball and fell in love with it. So it was always the goal to keep playing that at the highest level. I had a few schools that I had really had my heart set on, throughout the recruiting process. Was really interested in that, always thinking kind of that blend of academics and having those opportunities alongside the athletics was really important to me. So some high academic institutions within that, but due to an ACL injury at a really pivotal recruiting time, some of those other places moved on, very understandable. But Dartmouth came into the picture then when I was in high school, and for my first visit, immediately fell in love, and that was the place for me. It was just the perfect mix of the type of school in terms of very quintessential college feel, atmosphere. The academics, of course, were there. The athletics experience and the balance that it gave me to really excel on the court, but also pursue other things, which I know we'll talk about, was awesome. And it was truly the best 4 years. Absolutely loved it. So yeah, the end goal was always there, but kind of how the road led me to where it was supposed to be was different than I expected, but in the best way.
Absolutely. That's kind of what life is like, right? Like you have a plan in your head and then something totally throws a wrench in your plans, and then you end up somewhere maybe you never thought you would be, but it obviously paved the road for you to be very, very successful in what you're doing now. And you had a great opportunity there.
Yeah, definitely would not have been, certainly not most likely not in this career or, this exact spot had it not been for my time at Dartmouth and some of the opportunities afforded, both academically, athletically, professionally, et cetera. So definitely worked out for the best.
Was it a big transition for you? Because I know you lived in Florida, you played at OVA. So for all the volleyball players listening, OVA is where Carly played. I played at Northern Lights. And I think back in the day, there was a little bit of a little rivalry there when you'd get to AAUs. So I remember playing OVA very, very vividly often. Was it a big transition for you going from Florida to moving to the Northeast?
Yes, in about as many ways as you can imagine. Certainly the weather was very different. The environment was
Yeah.
very different, very rural, kind of woodsy environment up in New Hampshire where Dartmouth is versus very suburban Orlando. But I loved it. Like that was probably the biggest change was environmentally, but it was a very diverse school. People from all over the world, all over the country, different beliefs, viewpoints. That was something that was honestly new to me and that I really came to value. It was hard at first, but came to value that. That athletics transition was certainly there. I think all college athletes or a lot experience that. You're really at the top of your game in high school. And then
Yeah.
you get to the next level and you're like, oh, I am definitely the low woman on the totem pole. And it's a good experience to kind of go through that and have to work through and different things. So lots of adjustments. My first, semester was not easy by any means. And there were times throughout the whole, 4 years that were not easy, but it was definitely something that I think Dartmouth did a great job, and I'm appreciative of my coaches and staff there for helping to try and find the points of balance, whether it was in social life or academic life, to know that yes, priority one, or one of many top priorities is
Yes.
how we're doing on the court. But if you had a class at a certain time, like I did my freshman winter, and I missed some of our practices, I would go do, individuals later and things like that. So always trying to find that balance, but there was a lot of support amongst the program. My family was incredibly supportive, friends, and everyone to kind of help ease those transitions and make it as successful as possible.
I think that's really great to hear because there are a lot of programs out there that maybe don't focus on the other priorities that we do have in our lives as athletes, whether it's developing as a human or socially or academically. It can be hard to give all of those buckets the amount of time that they need for us to truly prosper in all those areas.
Yeah.
And I think it's tough. It makes it tough for candidates to be able to, I say candidates, athletes, to be able to transition out of their sport when those days are over, because they put so much time and effort and energy into the one thing, and then they don't know what's next.
Yeah. Yeah, that is very relatable. And I know we talked a little bit about in our first conversation, now we're on the record of just kind of the things that you take with you from your athletic experience that you oftentimes don't even realize. Like there are some things that, come to mind maybe more quickly than others: the time management, the teamwork, the working through adversity, getting feedback, and how you can apply that, how you give yourself feedback as well as take it from other people. And I think that certainly translates to the next phases, but it can be hard when you're missing some of the same camaraderie of a team or the same competitive drive. Like work is important. And you want to be a really great seller or a really great, whatever it is that you do for your career, but it's not the same type of competition and you kind of miss that component. And so I think that transition can be really hard for athletes. And I know I've felt that while there are things that innately you're experiencing that set you up, there are other things that you miss big time that can be really hard to navigate through.
I totally agree with that. I think the transition out can be really difficult, especially if you're not focused on those other pieces of who you are. You think your skills won't transition to the next arena, but they totally do in so many ways. And I know that's shown up for you in so many ways in your current career. Did you always know that you wanted to play, or did you know that you wanted to work in sports after you graduated? Or how did this opportunity present itself?
Yeah, I would say generally yes, especially, in high school when you start thinking more about like realistically, what do I want to be when I grow up? The sports industry aspects of it were very interesting to me. I went into Dartmouth studying psychology. I knew that was what I wanted to do for a variety of reasons. One, just personal interest. I, think it's a really fascinating field. Dartmouth didn't have, or doesn't even, have a sports management major or even just a general business major, some things that might be a little more immediately applicable. And so to me, psychology was a great way to marry something that I was interested in, but also knowing how teams work, how groups function. So when I was, doing my studies, it was more in the lane of like group psychology, organizational psychology than, therapy or some of those other lanes. And so I give that context to say, knowing I had this idea of working in sports, was able to use what I was studying, did a few internships while I was at school, which is another unique thing that Dartmouth and Ivy League sports offered, because you had some summers free. Dartmouth is on quarters, so I was able to take a winter off and intern with the Orlando Magic at home. So just some different opportunities you don't always get as a student athlete, which I'm really grateful for. So doing those in the sports industry with the Orlando Magic, with the NFL Players Association, really set me up and helped me to find out my why of, why am I interested in the sports industry? I think a lot of people, view sports as something that's, fun. If you're a fan, it's cool to be involved in. And that is very much true, but it is also a business. And so starting to realize, what lanes am I interested in? Is it pro? Is it college? Is it player facing? Is it more on the, front office or business side? Really started to flesh that out during my time at college, even in the first few years of my career, and still being fleshed out today. Who knows, right? What the next 30 plus years of my career will look like. But, that's essentially had that kind of in the back of my mind and used a few different opportunities to figure out exactly what it looks like as I began my career in the industry.
I look back on my athletic career and I did not have a real opportunity to do internships or really anything outside of sport. And I do think that is something that is so valuable. Mm-hmm. When you're laser focused on your sport, it's tough to want to focus on anything else. But the fact that you had that opportunity to take a semester off or a quarter off and actually learn about, okay, how am I going to utilize these skills beyond the court? Because that time in your life is so short. And I don't think you really realize it until it's over. And then you go, oh my God, now what? Now what do I do with all this knowledge?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a lot of things. It's easier to look back in hindsight and wish you had done that or taken more advantage of, a certain opportunity. But you don't know in the moment. Right. And I think that's part of the fun. You just get to figure out your story as you go, but there's a lot of things as you look back in hindsight and then be able to look forward and see how you can adapt and apply that too.
Totally. And you made the most of the opportunities that you had in front of you. Like, what do I like? I don't have, I have a very general degree like psychology, which I actually think is a very big strength because I work with a lot of candidates here at Shift who, when they get hyper specific about things, they're very committed to, okay, well, I spent all this time in my degree. Now I have to actually go do the exact thing that I studied. When a lot of times it might be in your best interest to do the psych major, do the general business degree or whatever it is. And then you can kind of go out into the workforce and not really be married to one specific route. And so you had the opportunity to go work for the Orlando Magic and then go work for the NFLPA and learn about what you were interested in. How did you end up at the NFLPA? It was an internship. And what did that really teach you about what you wanted to do for the next chapter of your career?
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the most pivotal 10 weeks of my life. It was really impactful. So I just applied through the online, intern application portal. And
awesome. You don't hear that anymore. You don't hear that anymore. Like, I just applied through the portal and got the job. Yeah, that's rare.
It's funny looking back. It is a small world, right? And there's always people. And so, I applied that way. It became known to me after the fact, once I was there, that a family friend had, put in a connection. I didn't know that in the moment. So there might've been some back channels in my favor, but just applied and landed up in the former player services department. So what that department does at the PA is they provide all sorts of support, whether it's ongoing continuing education, financial, career, camaraderie, and events for any former player in the NFL, whether it's, Tom Brady, who played for 20 years, or, a guy who signed in a training camp in the summer and that was it. So there's a huge range of athletes that they work with, a lot of different desires, needs, feelings towards their sport as they've transitioned out. And so was very much an intern there. I did a lot of upkeep around their CRM and helping plan some of the upcoming events. But why I found that to be so pivotal was just the recognition that I know I was experiencing that. That was before my summer, or the summer before my senior year at Dartmouth. And so by no means was I an NFL player transitioning, but I was coming to that point of my career. My dad, who I mentioned had played basketball, played professionally, and I saw how he interacted with his kind of retired players association and some of the great benefits that had for him and for my family. And just recognizing people are coming out in such a different place out of their sport into the next phase of their life. Some who don't need a second career, many of whom do need a second career. And so just got me thinking of kind of what are those support systems in place? What are ways that athletes can be thinking about during their playing days, whether it's as a professional, collegiate, even high schooler who's going to maybe not play at the next level. How are they thinking ahead? How do they have resources in place around them or taking their own initiative to do so? So it was really pivotal. Loved that time. In fact, it pretty directly led me to where I am now at Altius. During that summer, made some connections with one of the VPs at the PA who, as I was graduating Dartmouth, was just, keeping the options open, circling the wagons amidst COVID as well. Reached out to him, Casey Schwab, and he let me know that he was going to be starting this new company, Altius, kind of what it was about, and asked if I wanted in, and if nothing else, to just help in the startup life. And that was almost 6 years ago now, and there's been a lot of growth in the company and myself since then. But I give that anecdote to say, like, to your point, you don't know where people end up. You don't know what opportunities will be in front of you. And so not only was that personally developing for kind of my why in the industry, helping athletes, feel empowered and supported and prepared in things outside of their sport, but also gave me a great launch point into kind of that first and ongoing step of my career.
I think that's such an important thing to call out, is you never know when you're in a room what other opportunities might present themselves based on, the work you do and how you're showing up in your day to day. You never know who you're going to meet that might open a door for you. And so it is important to be not only, of course, a hard worker, but authentic to who you are, because I think it really is, a lot of it is who you know and who you connect with, and making those connections and community is so important. And that can really give you a lot of opportunities just based on who you are and connecting with people. And I kind of want to know, since you spent some time at the NFLPA helping and experiencing and seeing those athletes transition out of their sport, I think it just gets harder as you probably move up the chain to transition out of your sport once it becomes more and more of your identity. If someone's listening and they don't have a PA to go to get resources, how do they start looking ahead to what's next? Or what is a big takeaway that you saw that helps athletes build community outside their sport?
Yeah, I think a very obvious one that admittedly I haven't used, but a lot of my teammates have, is to find that team, that camaraderie, kind of ease the transition, is even like little things like a volo league. I don't know if that's a national thing, but like a rec league of your sport, or a different type of sport, right? That's maybe you are burnt out or have mixed feelings about the sport you played, but can you play kickball or softball or tennis or pickleball, and just be able to kind of ease that transition with people who might be in a similar headspace, be able to talk to individuals. I had a great relationship with some of the girls on my team who were a few years older than me, and hearing about their transition as they were going through it. They were in very different places, one of whom, is coaching and is really still in the volleyball world. Another of whom is not, and is very much in her career and other aspects of, her life. And just kind of saying, what do I want my story to look like when I come out? You don't exactly know, how you're going to feel about things, but being able to talk to people, get that perspective. Similarly with the girls who were in my class, we're all in very different places now too, but being able to just talk through kind of what we've experienced and look back, I think was really helpful. And even when you're in the moment, I would say, like, be thinking about, what is it that I like to do, right? Okay, yes, your sport, but are there other hobbies or interests or values or, causes that you care about that you can start exploring now to just kind of not fill that void, right? You're never gonna replace the time and the effort and the energy that you put into your sport for years, but other things that you can try and put your passions behind, and start getting involved in that, when you can, even as an athlete, to be able to ease that along the way.
Yeah, I think the internet makes the world so much smaller too. It's so much easier to connect now with people who might be going through the same thing as you. So, I mean, I even know about, are you a Launch Break member?
No, but you told me about them, and so I've had their tab open for too long.
So just for any former female athletes listening, it's for women only, but there is a community called Launch Break, that's actually how I connected with Marina, who introduced us. I think there's just so many free ways to get connected with people who have a similar background as you, or to get support, that there's just a lot of ways to make it happen now, even outside of the personal connections. Like I agree, join a club, follow your hobbies, because a lot of times as athletes, we didn't even have the opportunity to have hobbies when we were playing. So those things can point you in a direction to start to explore, like, okay, how else can I maybe fill or at least attend to a little bit of that void that maybe your sport has left in your life.
Yeah. And I think it's okay to feel all the feelings too, right? This is the psychology degree coming out. Like, don't, if I've had friends who needed to take 6 months off of physical activity because they were done. I myself had to stick with it because I was getting it's itchy and antsy. And so wherever anyone is at on that spectrum, physically or mentally, of like ready to be done versus really missing it, like it's all good, right? Feel where you're at and use that time to really assess, like you said, Jordan, of, what your interests might be, where you can best, plug in. And the first place or thing you try, like, might not be it either. And that's okay. Like, you've got a lot of time ahead of you to figure it out.
Yeah, that's a good call out too. I mean, the first thing you try, it might not be it. And I think that goes for hobbies, things you're trying after your sport. It also might even go for that first job. I think a
100%.
lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves to like have it all figured out when they graduate, because I was the athlete, I was at the top of my game, and now I'm going to the bottom of the totem pole, like you said early on in the conversation. How did you deal with that transition from, you were top of your game in high school, you go become the top of your game in college, and then you enter the workforce and you are essentially starting over? That can be something that's really hard for people. So what was that like for you, maybe starting at the bottom of Altius, your first full-time gig?
Yeah, it's really interesting because it was very much starting in a new place, personally and professionally, but also a brand new business. Like, we were a startup. I was employee number one. My colleagues always remind me that even before our founder, I was getting paid. And so it really was like the beginning of the beginning. Also at the beginning of a new kind of subset of the industry. This was pre-NIL, pre-rev share, and that was going to be and is a large part of what Altius focuses on. And so it was a lot of new things at the beginning, which in some ways I am grateful for, because we were all learning as we were going, was exposed to a lot of things and had a lot of opportunities I likely would not have been if I was, joining something really well established. Like, I was in, meetings with ADs and head coaches and sports industry, like the Mount Rushmore of people that should probably not have been in at that time. But I'm really grateful to have, been in those rooms. I think that's helped me accelerate along the way. But I guess to your question on like, what is it like starting over? Like, it very much was, okay, let's figure it out. I think as an athlete, and this has been something I've kind of prided myself on all along the way, is like being very coachable and like taking that feedback and learning, adapting, being open-minded. It's certainly not always easy. It can be very jarring having that kind of feedback coming in a different context, because, you're maybe used to it in one way from a coach. It's similar but different from a boss, right? Or from a client. So recognizing there's going to be differences there, but as we talked about, taking those skills, saying, how can you apply certain things, grinding it out when you need to, I think really helped in kind of the first bit of my career, as a new person starting in a brand new industry, brand new company. A lot of firsts, but it's been awesome now 6 years in to see that growth. Same way as you're a freshman coming in and you're like, gosh, I'm going to die if I do one more squat. But then 4 years later, you're, not knocking them out. So it's a similar mindset.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely open-minded. I could definitely say that, having joined a totally new company, total startup, for your first opportunity out of college. And then you are also making a huge transition, just the company as a company, when NIL really comes on the scene. So what was that like? You started a company and then you're like, whoa, NIL is here. It's arrived. It's here to stay. How did things really change internally for you? Did your whole job do a 180 overnight, or what did that look like?
Yeah. So launching in 2020, about a year before all of NIL officially went live in 2021, like, we in the Mount Rushmore of folks I mentioned that I was fortunate to work with, like, saw this coming, right? A lot of people who very deep ties to the college space, very deep ties to the pro space, saw this on the horizon. And that was a lot of the value prop to begin with to our school clients. Okay, not myself at the time, but our team has this experience and knows what's coming. You as a school don't have the expertise, the bandwidth. This is during COVID. Like, you have other things that are just more immediately pressing. Let us help you set up the structures. Firstly, educate you on what you need to know and how this is going to look, and set up the structures so that you as a school can be really successful, knowing that our first clients were LSU, Texas, and Tennessee, and South Carolina. So all now SEC schools, but very different in terms of how they approached things. So it was kind of that combination of trying to have the foresight as a company, and then in myself and my role, getting up to speed as quickly as I can on, where things are going, the history, what NIL actually is and what it could become. has been, or that was, at the time a big focus. Then we're working with school clients on kind of implementing with them on what their campuses could entail. Certainly once everything goes live in 2021, like it's just, full steam ahead. Altius grew a lot. And that's, I think, where my role really shifted from much more of all right, we're in startup mode, support, building decks and sending agendas and prepping calls. That was still happening. We're still a very small team, but as through that, had some opportunities, again, probably earlier in my career than most people, to own some of those client relationships, to be the go-to for an AD or a coach or, someone who's leading the charge there on a campus. The athletes as well, as they were now having this new opportunity for them. So that's continued to grow and accelerate in different ways during my time at Altius. But that's a quick flyover of the kind of what that was like at the beginning.
Yeah. And I want to actually dive deeper into what you're doing now with Altius, because there's almost like two sides, or I guess the way I'm thinking about it, and you can educate me and everyone listening, is like there's the athlete side of NIL, but there's also the university side where their goals are maybe a little different, or maybe they just need different support. I know in our first conversation, you talked about how you're really advising the athletic departments on like operations and revenue generation, and all these athletic departments, like they're probably stretched for resources, but there's a huge opportunity here. So I guess, how are you helping to support both groups of people, or is it similar?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think you're spot on that there's ultimately the end goal is the same, should be opportunities for athletes, helping. Now a lot of that's monetary, but there are other, opportunities that an athletic department can provide to a student athlete. But how they get there, how those different parties approach it is different. So on the athlete side, athletes are a big part of our work at Altius for the first, let's say, 4 years, and they still are, but they were, a primary constituent. I was on campuses all the time educating athletes on everything from early days of what is NIL, what does this mean for you? Here's how you can start to build a social media brand, financial literacy, coming up with your own opportunities, et cetera. And with the schools during those earlier days, it was a lot of continuing to build that infrastructure, training the trainer in some ways, helping their student athlete development or compliance, be able to reinforce those things with their athletes. Now, as we've grown, the athlete side is still very important, but a lot of them have their own agents, or the schools are equipped to be able to handle some of those athlete factors. And so as we've grown, and a lot of my role now is working with the schools on where they're stretched for resources, how can we, generate more revenue, be better aligned or integrated in everything that you're doing from a departmental side, be that your sponsorships, your ticketing, places that even athletes can tap into that and support and create their own NIL deals through things like, a corporate partnership that might exist. But ultimately having, growing the pie for the school so that they can help grow the pie for the athlete, I think is where that meets. There's a lot of, obvious things of what that looks like. I feel like every school call I'm on, it's like, how can we help you? And the answer is we need more money. Like everyone's trying to find this pot of gold. But I think a lot of the folks in athletics, both, the sports business, like our team at Altius, as well as the folks on campus, also have the athletes' best interest and development in mind too. So it's trying to find that mix.
It really sounds like you have to go in and almost wear a lot of different hats depending on what the school's needs are. I'm sure you have like a revenue hat, an operations hat, like all the different things. And I'm wondering, when you're having these initial conversations and you're trying to get to the root of, it's like, of course, yeah, we all need more money, but is there something that the universities are typically overlooking, or you're like, okay, I always see this one thing that we need to maybe correct or just dive in a little bit deeper? Is there something like that you constantly see?
Yeah, I think because so much of this is new, right? Like since 2021, it feels like the last 5 years have had more change probably than many other 5-year increments in the history of college sports. And so it feels like we've come a long way in that time, and we have. But a lot of things are, I'll say, like, for example, contracts that the institutions have with their MMR partner. So whoever is selling their corporate partnerships, or their apparel partner who creates, the merch that you can buy, in a bookstore. A lot of those contracts were signed 10, 15 plus years ago. And so they have they haven't contemplated what the world looks like now. And so what a lot of that when we're working with schools is kind of where we start of, okay, let's look into, an MMR contract and what do you have in here that is maybe underutilized, or you don't have some assets here that exist now, like jersey patches, that can now be put on a football, basketball, any sport uniform, but most of the time that hasn't been contemplated before because you couldn't do it. And so I would say that's one area that is increasingly looked into. We help our schools with that, trying to, when you come up on, an expiration or a look-in date of some of those agreements, how can you try and maximize as much as possible going forward, both for the school and like I said, for the athletes? Are there ways that they can be further integrated in your sponsorships, have some dollars flow in their direction too? So I would say that's one of the first places that we start in, is increasingly risen to the priority for our schools to look into.
That's really interesting. And now that you say that, I mean, you see it almost as a consumer in the athletic space. Like when you're at a game and you like go into the bookstore to like look at gear, you're kind of like, oh, sometimes it can feel a little bit like maybe the contract hasn't been revisited in 10 years. So I can see where that would be somewhere you'd want to start, because it is just a little bit more, I guess, of an old school mentality. And like so much change has come about in the past 5 years in terms of what they can do, what they can sell, what athletes can partner with. There's just so many things that can be updated and changed. Where do you see it going over the next 3 to 5 years? Like, do you have a vision on what else might be coming?
Yeah, we always joke, no one has the crystal ball. That would be very nice to know. And I think people who are very definitive of this is what's going to happen are either naive or deceptive or something like that. Like we all try and be very open-minded because, right, who knows what tomorrow or 6 months down the line could bring. But what it is seeming like, and from personally where I would imagine some of this goes, is I do think there will be some increasing separation, whether that's by certain conferences continuing to elevate themselves or certain sports potentially operating in a more independent or, increasingly professionalized type manner, whether that goes to where some of the conversation is now of athletes becoming employees or collectively bargaining. Like there's a lot of steps that would get us to that point if that's where it goes. But nonetheless, I think you'll see that increasing separation, which, to be fair, in my opinion, I think is maybe for the best for some of those sports. And then also for the other sports like, a volleyball or a softball or field hockey, being able to get, not be overshadowed by some of the big changes that are happening for, we'll say, bigger sports or revenue generating sports, and being able to still have opportunities for some of those other sports, but just not get overshadowed in that way. I think from a departmental perspective, we'll just see increasing alignment, integration of all of those different types of revenue buckets, if you will, like I mentioned, to just play off one another. The schools, the organizations that can be the most nimble to do that, whether that's by privatizing parts of their athletic department or, integrating, like I said, athletes in new ways. Not being afraid to take some calculated risks, I think is going to be really important on the school side, and more are going to get comfortable with doing that for a variety of reasons. So I think that's broad strokes where we'll go, and how that coalesces into an actual, landing point in the next 3 to 5 years will be really interesting to follow along, both as a fan and in the business.
It's really interesting to hear your perspective on that, because when I think traditionally think of university athletic departments, it's that slow moving, low risk, minimize that's just the stereotype. And I think NIL is really forcing a lot of these athletic departments to truly operate as a business, and they got to get with the times quick. And it's good to hear that they're doing that. For athletes that are listening, or maybe athletes that, and I want to ask this question because earlier you had mentioned that so many athletic departments are thinking, or you're advising them on how they can actually bring the athletes into the equation, if ticket sales or food and beverage or whatever it is. As an athlete, how does one make the most of this time in NIL, or how do they stand out to those athletic departments that are maybe wanting to use some athletes to help their revenue side of the business?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is not being afraid to tell your story, tell your coaches, tell your sport administrator, tell your compliance officer, your athletics trainer, whoever you're come in contact with. Just be open about the things that make you unique, whether that's a hobby or an interest you have in the arts or in writing. Whether that's, a family history you have of people who are served in the military or who are first responders, whether you have a pet, whether you have siblings, a hometown you're from, whatever is the case, some of those things that set you apart, just be open with that, because a lot of the brands that are getting involved in this space, oftentimes via the school as a partner, or, coming to the school looking for someone to work with, those are the things that they care about. They want someone who fits with them authentically, who is in a similar mission, or is maybe, from a place where they're opening up a new store. It doesn't have to be something huge and flashy. One of our Big Ten schools, for example, they have a grocery store partner who is opening up a new location in a new kind of town, suburb from where this department is. So they had athletes who are from that hometown go to the grand opening, post all about it, and got pretty decent amount of money, right? It's maybe not super exciting, but it's something where there's a really authentic tie. And so just being able to be open about who you are, raise your hand, ask questions. Hey, are there opportunities for X, Y, or Z? Or I have an idea for X, Y, or Z. Put yourself out there, because it makes it that much easier for the schools too, because they're trying to find someone who fits. And if you make that known, all the better.
I absolutely love that advice, Carly, because I am of the true belief that you can learn from anybody, because everybody has a story to tell, and it doesn't have to be the flashiest or this crazy thing. It's like everyone has their own authentic journey, their own authentic story, their own something that makes you excited. And that's going to stand out to the right person. Like when you live in that authenticity, it's going to bring you to the right rooms that you should be in. And like you mentioned, those athletes, they got the grocery store grand opening deal. And it's like, yeah, sure. Maybe that's not what, ultimately maybe they want to do something bigger than that, but that is you don't know what doors that will open for you. Essentially, you don't know like who you're going to meet at that opening. You do a great job. You show up, you show your enthusiasm and your pride and, where you're from. That's going to open more opportunities up to you. So I just think that's great advice, to really lean into the things that make you unique and special, because nobody else has your story. Nobody else has your authentic voice. And that can be really powerful.
Yeah, I could not agree more. I think that's the biggest thing in working with athletes, both men and women, across sports, across types of schools, where if they have any interest, any, initiative that they want to take, like take it, let someone know, or start posting on your own, or start doing speaking engagements on your own. Of course, keep the main thing, right? Go to school, keep your sport, all of those, social life, things like that. But the first step is trying. The first step is getting started. The first step is, like you said, showing up well, enthusiastically, representing yourself well, and that can open that many more opportunities down the line.
100%. I know we're running short on time here, so I just have a couple more questions that I want to ask you. I just want to know if you could give one piece of advice to anyone listening, or even if it's your younger self looking back, what would you tell yourself or an athlete now about building a career beyond their sport? What should they do?
Yeah, I alluded to some of this before, but I think I would not overlook what could be transferable, especially, some of that you might not realize in the moment. But when you do start to take your next steps in doing interviews, or, applying to internships, applying to jobs, not be afraid to leverage the work that you've done, talk about what it's like to be a part of a team, talk about how you've responded to coach feedback or adversity through an injury or through losses. All of those things really do make a difference. I'm sure you experience this, Jordan. Like the number of employers who say we want to hire a student athlete because they have those backgrounds is like, it's an invaluable, piece of experience you have in your resume. So don't count that out. I would also say on a personal note, like savor the time, because in a blink of an eye, like it'll be, for me, 6 years later, I have recurring dreams about stepping out onto the court and I'll never get to do it again. And I miss it. And so enjoy the time, take the most of it, take the most of the resources you have on your campus, through alumni networks, through, former athletes who are just a few years older than you, who have graduated, get the reps, if you will, and having networking type conversations. And don't be afraid to put yourself out there.
You're so right. It is such a short time in your life. You don't realize it. It's a blip on the radar until it's over. And then you're like, wow, that went by so fast. So
Yeah.
I'm with you there. Enjoy the moment, but know that the skills that you have are so desirable. Every company that we work with here at Shift Group works with Shift because they want to hire athletes and veterans. That's why they work with us. Your skills are incredibly valuable. I could not agree anymore. So final question for you, Carly. For the namesake of the show, I just always ask, what does changing the game mean to you?
Yeah, I think changing the game to me means being both confident and coachable, a word I've used a few times this conversation, but owning what you bring to the table, owning your experience, not being afraid to step into new places and new rooms or raise your hand for something, but at the same time being open-minded, being nimble, being innovative, driving yourself and those around you to be willing to change. I think that's what changing the game is all about. You don't know what tomorrow will bring for you personally, professionally, for the world. So show up and be ready, but also be ready to adapt as you go.
Thank you so much for being here, Carly. Your advice was so invaluable, and thank you for sharing your experience. Where can our listeners connect with you if they want to find you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place for me. I'm on there as Carly Kastens, Carly Tower Kastens. My maiden name is also included. I'm on LinkedIn probably way too much. So if you send me a note, I will be sure and connect with you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carly. Thank you to the listeners as well. We will be back next time, and we've loved having you, Carly. Thanks again.
Absolutely. Great to be here.